Hello, I'm Earl Weinberg, and this is Book Circle Presents The Cavalry Cycle. This time we're going to start Warm Yule, Horsepower, another Christmas story where the lads go home and the families meet them after the transformation. The village of Limstow was decked for Christmas. The trees along the high street bore white lights, a two-story Christmas tree glowed in the center of the green, and opposite it, the face of the church was floodlit to show off the garlands of evergreen and holly. But just now, the residents focused their attention on the horse trailer drawn up at the edge of the green. Arguing voices came from within. If we'd gone on in the order we're getting out, she wanted the weight forward. Watch the bow, don't step on it. I am watching it, I'm just pushing it aside with my foot. Your foot is... A young woman climbed out of the lorry hauling the trailer. She was wearing jodhpurs, a jacket of military cut, and a cowboy hat, which she raised politely to the cluster gathered around the trailer door. She then rapped firmly on the door and demanded, "Hey, pony boys, what's the problem?" One of the double doors opened from inside. A dark-bearded young man in similar uniform thrust out his head and shoulders, smiled at the people, and tipped his own hat. "We're experiencing technical difficulties," he explained cheerfully. In just the other door swung open, and another young man stepped out. Only the young man was a chestnut horse from the waist down. He held an unstrung bow protectively in one hand. As he tipped his hat, the first soldier stepped after him, revealing himself to be compounded of a large bay horse. The onlookers watched with interest, but no shock. They were sundered folk. There was a fairy in the church and a mage down the street. "Now?" asked a voice from inside the trailer. "Now," said the bay soldier, as the chestnut pulled the door open wider and proclaimed, "Ta-da!" "Oh, give over," grumbled the third voice, and out stepped a third soldier. He was, simultaneously, a husky young man with a curly black beard and a large black draft horse. Large. The chestnut and the bay were a little under and over 7 feet tall, but even the bay only came up to this soldier's shoulder. He peered about the crowd. "Rene!" The giant dropped a couple of duffel bags, skipped over to a young couple, and whirled them into a very unevenly balanced ring around the rosy. Even the other soldiers stepped back. There were a couple of unseasonal exclamations. Rene stopped after a couple of rotations. "Show me the ring," he demanded of the girl, Jenny. She pulled off a mitten and exhibited a diamond ring. Rene kissed her on the cheek and gave the boy, Claude, a one-armed hug. Both operations involved bending down, and the two humans reached up in returning hugs. "I didn't think you could turn in place," said Claude, sounding a bit winded. The ring dance had been more like a quadrupedal pirouette. "Agility 3, Rene answered proudly. "Just finished in good marks." "Rene," Mr. and Mrs. Wardley stepped up. Rene knelt, bringing him down to a good height to hug his parents. The other two soldiers came over and dropped Rene's duffels beside him. "You must be," started his mother, paused to consult her memory, and continued, "Dan Bryce and Charles Darnley." They smiled at her. "Correct, ma'am," said Darnley, the big bay. He tipped his hat to her. "Trickshot and Charlie Horse," said Rene's father. "Also correct, sir. I assume you know your son is Horsepower?" The parents laughed and nodded. The driver walked up. "Excuse me, people, I have to deliver these two to their families." "And then drive herself back to Upham," Dan Bryce added. "Long night. So, hello and goodbye then. Happy Christmas." He tipped his hat and headed back into the trailer. Charles Darnley saluted and followed. They eased their way through some onlookers who had been staring into the trailer curiously. The interior did not look much like a horse trailer. Having mats on the floors, the soldiers stood much higher than horses and had to sit when traveling, and an intercom and TV screen on the forward wall. Bryce and Darnley ducked and climbed in, then acrobatically twisted around, tipped hats once more, and pulled the doors shut behind themselves, preempting an attempt by the driver. She checked about for stray luggage, tipped her own hat to the observers, wished everyone happy Christmas, and was soon off. Rene surveyed the remaining onlookers. All were familiar to him, but it was clear he was no longer familiar to all of them. This was only natural, he had to admit. "Hello, Rene," someone ventured. He picked out Mr. Fitzhugh, his old teacher and the squire's cousin. "Welcome home. You look well," with just the slightest hesitation before "well." "Hi, Mr. Fitzhugh." He gave back a determined smile. "Yes, I am well, thanks. I've never felt better. Hi, everybody. I do know how I look, and I know it's a shock, but I'm still glad to see you all. Happy Christmas. You'll be seeing me around." He turned with deliberation to picking up his duffels and moving off with his friends and family. "You'll be hard to miss," murmured someone, followed by some scattered laughter. Rene tried to decide if he heard any meanness in it. You couldn't deny the truth of it. Claude helped him strap the duffels to the harness along his flanks. "Was that last bit prepared?" asked his father. "A little. Did it sound okay?" "Yes, laid a good groundwork." "But, Rene," he stopped and craned his neck up at his son. "I'd forgotten. Pictures and emails just don't convey how big you are," Jenny concluded, laughing. Rene spread his arms and shrugged. He smiled a little wistfully. "I hope nobody minds." "Minds?" exclaimed his mother. "Do you mind?" His smile lost the wistful tang. No, I like it. Sure, it's awkward sometimes, but I really like this shape." No one said it was better than being dead. They did not have to go over it again. "Well then," said his mother, and reaching up, hooked her arm through his elbow. His father did the same on the other side, and they continued toward home. Jenny and Claude walked to one side holding hands. "Aren't you cold?" Jenny asked after a few paces. She, like the other humans, was in a heavy anorak. "Nope, I got my saddle blanket, my leggings, my hat, my winter coat." "It doesn't look like a very warm coat," Jenny objected, regarding the brown military jacket. Rene followed her glance. "Oh, not that. That's just my duty jacket. This is my winter coat." And reaching down to where his thigh had once been, he ruffled the fur on his equine shoulder. "You guys get a lot of fun out of those hats," Claude remarked while Jenny thought over the last remark. "Yeah, we do. You can hardly tip them too often, and people like it. Captain Fletcher's very big on etiquette, reputation issues and all. The one for my dress uniform is deep blue." "You brought your dress uniform?" his mother asked. "Of course, for Christmas service, if nothing else. That reminds me, where's Father Quentin? I was hoping to see him." "Busy at the church, I'm sure, so close to Christmas." Rene turned and looked back at the church. "Right. Can I invite him over to the house this evening and grim?" "Certainly," said his mother. "Why?" "I just want to talk to all of you at once. Orientation, you could call it." They all looked their worry at him. "Nothing bad. I just think I need explaining." Jenny and Claude laughed. "How do we look to you?" Claude asked. "Besides short." Rene barked a laugh. "Well, short covers a lot of it. You know how if you step on a step stool, you see the whole room from a different angle? It's like that for me all the time." "And fragile?" asked his father. "You were so careful when you hugged your mum and me." "Yes, that too." He supposed it was odd for his parents to see him towering over them as it was for him to see them down there. And were they looking tired? Maybe they were finally looking relaxed. They reached home. "Are you sure," Rene asked his mother, "that you want to put me in my old room?" He had ducked to get through the door and was now stooping slightly under the ceiling. "Like I said, I could camp out in the garage if you'll move the car." "Nonsense," said his mother, though she had a dubious eye on the narrow gap between his head and the ceiling. "I've got it all prepared for you. Go see what you think." The stutter was because, although she had given thought to the arrangement of the room, she had only now come to consider the stairway and the hall. The stairs creaked alarmingly under Rene's hooves, but he mounted more smoothly than he had on days of bad lung infections. Then he had staggered everywhere when he had moved at all. "Didn't he say he now weighed a ton?" Claude murmured to Mr. Wardley, who nodded. "What if he gets stuck?" asked Jenny as he disappeared into the hallway. "He's like a hamster in one of those exercise tubes," muttered Claude. "I heard that," came back down the stairs. "I won't get stuck. Agility class. This is the sort of thing it was all about. The hamster got good scores. We have this house we practice in with stairs and all. Hey, Mum, thanks. This looks great." Besides tidying, she had removed the bed and chair and left a pair of mattresses in place of the bed. It was like the gym matting back in the barracks, only thicker and softer. He resolved to not let his hooves tear up the sheets and to make it look like he used the blankets. He eyed his bookcase and wondered how many books he could bring back to Upham. The step-stool effect came on again. Had he ever looked at his room from this height? "Can we come up?" called Jenny. Rene looked around and had to admit a certain resemblance between himself and a pimento and an olive. "No, I'll be right back down to show you I can do it." He dropped the duffels, unbound another pair of packs from his harness, executed an Agility 3 rotation in place, and went back to the stairs. He would go down forwards, he decided, to look as normal as possible, even though backwards was actually easier. When he got to the top of the stairs, Conker was staring up from the bottom. Conker was their Labrador retriever. She was 9 now, her gleaming brown coat accented with a gray muzzle. Last Christmas, Rene had expected her to outlive him, possibly within the year. But here they all were. She cocked her head and whined faintly. "Hi, Conker," Rene said. He had wondered how this meeting would go among all the others. Conker stopped whining and wagged slightly, but the head stayed cocked. "It's me, Rene." Either she believed him, or the additional voice sample gave her confidence. She wagged more. Rene started down the stairs, and Conker backed off, looking thoroughly confused. Why, she clearly wondered, was Rene riding a horse in here? By the time he'd clattered and creaked to the bottom, she had somehow realized there was no horse. Rene wondered how. Did his body language make it clear he was a single animal? But she still looked worried. At the bottom, he crouched on the floor, lowering himself down on his elbows, and called softly. He did not have to. She came up immediately and licked his face. "I pass," he said, and his parents registered relief. "I never thought about how Conker would take it," Claude remarked. Illustrating how she took it, Conker worked her nose down Rene's body, sniffing now north, now south of his waist. Jenny laughed. "She's trying to figure you out." "I wish her luck." Rene rose slowly and made his way into the living room, Conker weaving unhandily among his legs. She seemed to be ignoring them as much as possible, nose upraised, intent on getting back to the familiar part of him. The furniture of the living room had been rearranged. Now the couch faced the bay window, which had a big braided rug just beneath it. "I thought it would be nice to sit and look out the window," his mother explained a little stiffly. "She thought it would be nice," her husband corrected, "if you had a place to sit." "Thank you, Mum," Rene said, reclining. Conker came up, sniffed his forelegs for a bit, then settled down between them and resumed comparing Rene fore and aft. "That was a fair-sized crowd to greet me," he remarked. "Didn't think they knew I was coming." "They didn't," Claude said. "Village grapevine. There's a big horse trailer here, you know what that means, and curiosity does the rest." "I didn't see Mr. Halbrand there, not that I looked." Halbrand, according to emails from home, had expressed disgust at Rene's transformation, loudly, to Mr. Wardley in the pub. On the other hand, before the transformation, he had markedly avoided Rene, never seeming to believe that cystic fibrosis wasn't catching. "I'm sure it'll be easy to avoid him." "No," his father countered. "It'll be easy for him to avoid you if he chooses. I'm sure it's sensible not to approach him, but don't you go out of your way on his account." Rene raised his eyebrows, but answered, "Yes, sir." "We didn't do that kind of thing when you were sick, and we won't do it now." "No, sir." His father laughed. "That sounds like you're answering your Captain Fletcher." Rene laughed back. "I guess so, sir. Cavalry training." "Hey!" Conker had shoved her nose under the hem of his jacket. She now scrabbled with her paws and seemed to be trying to burrow in it. Jenny studied the dog's actions. "She's trying to dig you out." "What, out of my horse pants?" "Well, there aren't any, girl." He pushed her gently away. "Look, let me get Father Quentin and Grimm. I'll have to have that talk." A few moments later, he was back on the high street. He gratefully breathed the winter air. The house had seemed very hot, and tried to piece his world together. The step-stool perspective lay strong on him. He had never viewed his town and home, his friends and family, from so high up for so long. He headed back toward the church. The crowd at the green was gone, but there were still a few people about. He passed two on the way to the church, both known to him slightly. He raised his hat and smiled to both. One smiled back nervously and hurried by. The other said, "Welcome back," before doing the same. He supposed those were wins. Rene knew Father Quentin and the church grim well from spending so much time peering over the edge of the grave. 4 times Father Quentin had given him extreme unction when lung infections had stubbornly failed to shift, and he and the grim had brought honesty and kindness to the heart-freezing task of preparing a teenage boy to face early death. They were friends, though very different kinds from Jenny and Claude. Respectfully, Rene took off his hat, then entered. It was not a large church, but high and shadowy even when full of Christmas candles, and all his life it had seemed vast on the inside. His being taller had not changed that. He took a few clopping paces down the aisle, looked around. Just as he drew breath to call out, something landed on his shoulder. He reared. Abruptly, he was 14 feet tall. Dizzy with his own height, he pawed the air with his 4 feet, his arms wheeling, a Sagittary rampant sprung from the coat of arms pricked out in the floodlit stained glass above. But while part of him was a startled horse, another part knew exactly what had happened and had half expected it, even before the creaking voice in his ear shrilled, "Hi-ho, Silver!" Before his hooves hit the stones of the floor, the weight pushed off his shoulder and landed before him. It was, or looked like, a small dog, with pointed ears and muzzle and a short coat the color of stone. It gave him a grin made of teeth and chirped, "Return and we return." "Keep faith and so do we," Rene answered. The creature nodded, stood on its hind legs, and was abruptly a knee-high monk in a habit spun of shadow, with a face that was still canine, though a tad more human. The ears stuck out through holes in the hood. The church grim made a show of looking Rene up and down. "Haven't had a horse in here since 1139. No, I tell a lie, 1136. Always getting 9s and 6s muddled up since we stopped using proper numerals. So, Rene Auguste, his baptismal name, how was your first transformation? Good?" "Good? Yes. I'm alive. I can breathe. I'm even strong. But it was confusing, like nothing else. I even have a hard time remembering it, though I try not to forget." Grim nodded. "That's the way it is the first few dozen times, then it's just part of life." In illustration, he dropped to all fours, dog again, turned black and expanded until he was even larger than Rene and had to place one forepaw and one rear carefully between pews. His voice deepened as he grew, the creak becoming a modulated growl. His eyes shone moonlight. Rene wondered if this observation was a prophecy, and if he dared ask. In the pause of his hesitation, he heard footsteps. Father Quentin entered. Seeing the giant apparition, he called, "Grim, is there trouble?" "Just a little shop talk between us transformatives." Grim shrank back down to a monkling, revealing Rene. "Rene!" Father Quentin beamed and strode down the aisle to seize Rene by the shoulders. "Rene, you..." Rene smiled. "Yeah, I know. Phone pictures just don't convey it." "When did you get in?" "Just a few minutes ago. Listen, Father, Grim, could you two come to our house for a bit? I wanted to talk to all of you." Priest and Fay traded glances. "Very well," said Father Quentin. "Is anything wrong?" No, I just wanted to talk about my transformation and where I seem to stand now. Nothing bad, just a little strange." Quentin lifted his eyebrows and swept his gaze up and down Rene's new frame. Grim went off into a series of yips that Rene recognized as mocking laughter. "Okay, but that's my point. It's only a little more strangeness on top of what's already happened." "Well, now you have me interested. Certainly I'll come. Grim?" "To be sure." Soon the three of them were walking back down the street. Quite a size range they presented, Rene thought, looking down, step stool again, on Father Quentin in a bright red anorak, with Grim, weatherproof, perched on his shoulder. "Father, you'd be in a good position to know. How does the village feel about me?" "Ah, I have rather been tracking that. I'd say most think the dedicated cavalry is, well, strange, but a fairly happy ending to what was otherwise a sad story. They're glad for you, as much as people who don't know you well are likely to be. All for the best, I suppose, might sum up their attitude. All the Fitzhughs and Mrs. Atherton and Mr. Dupuis think it's a mark of distinction to have a local boy in that cavalry. Mr. Halbrun you know about, I think." "Uh-huh. I decided years back he thinks I should have died at birth." Rene glanced down to see if he was shocking Quentin, but the priest did not change his thoughtful expression. I don't mean anything murderous. He just thought it was a shame I lived, I suspect. Now I've gone off and justified his beliefs. Quentin sighed. He is a prickly and disagreeable man, and like most such people, he has troubles of his own, rather a lot. He moved the topic on. Several young people have expressed intrigue and interest in your transformation that might make you unpopular with their parents. At least one girl is very annoyed that the cavalry only transforms boys. She can't be half as annoyed as us boys are. Quentin laughed and Grim yipped. I did find out that if you're suddenly transformed from a near basket case like I was into a completely healthy male, a whole bunch of temptations suddenly get a lot more vivid. You can tell that girl, if you like, that Dr. Blackhold has a niece as one of his apprentices, and I bet she's working to expand the scope of that spell. Quentin grunted noncommittally. A few minutes later, Rene was back on the braid rug, and everyone was provided with tea or coffee or, in Grim's case, hot cocoa. Conker, for reasons best known to herself, accepted his reappearance quite calmly and cuddled down against his belly between front and back legs. Rene, wondering how to begin, set his coffee mug down on a table and felt his t-shirt ride up yet again. He pulled it down yet again. It was one of the rusty red ones with the Cavalry logo over the left breast that served as fatigues. He caught Jenny staring at his middle. Sorry about the shirt, he said. This is the largest size. She waved dismissively. That's not it. I have to admit, I was wondering about the, join. There isn't any. No seam, no stitches. It's just a hairline. I'm a unit. Ask Conker. Well, Dr. Blackhold says it's human tissue above the line and horse tissue below on the whole, but it's all interlocked. So, of course, everyone stared at the vast horse torso laid out before them. His mother in particular looked sad. Mom, is something wrong? He immediately wished he'd kept still. No, I was just remembering your sweet little baby feet. Rene glanced at his hooves, then at Jenny and Claude, whose grins said, She's gotcha. Mother's. Well, Mum, they went a long time ago. I had big bony feet the morning I was changed. I remember specifically looking at them just before well... Oh, I know, all mothers get this way, and they're very impressive hooves and quite clean. Do you shoe yourself? She asked, clearly making a desperate search for whatever the new normal was to be. Just started. That's why the back ones are a little crooked, I think. How do you reach the back ones at all? Asked Claude. In fact, how do you get to your hindquarters, period? Like this, Rene answered. He edged away from Conker and rolled up into a crouch, pulling his hindquarters under him so that his equine body curled up like a cat poised over a mouse hole. Then I can reach my back feet. He demonstrated by grabbing a rear hoof. Then he looked up. His friends and relations were looking at him with smiles, suppressed to one degree or another, except for Grim, who was laughing silently, tongue lolling. Rene shrugged. Everyone has to get in silly positions sometimes. I think I shall use that in a sermon, said Father Quentin. It does look like a hard position for shoeing a horse, Claude acknowledged. Right now this horse is proud to be able to shoe himself at all. And we'll continue Rene's visit home next time.